Hey everyone, welcome back to a new video. I hope you had a great day. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories, shall we? The first story is called Employees Are Not Allowed to Eat. I used to work at a restaurant, actually two separate joints that shared a kitchen, which was often very slow during the week. I was pretty friendly with most of the bartenders, cooks, other servers, etc., except the manager and the assistant manager. The manager had been there for about 1,000 years. He was a cantankerous old guy that hated everyone and mumbled to himself a lot. He would often brag that he drove home half asleep at 4 AM and would jolt himself awake using the rumble strips when his car crossed into the shoulder. Like many assistant managers, the assistant manager was mean and bitter because he didn't have enough power to call the shots as the manager. But he had enough power to order the rank and file around and generally make life miserable. Our story begins one Tuesday evening. It was a slow night in my half, but the other place had live music and a decent crowd. I had been hustling and helping out the folks on the other side while waiting maybe 2 or 3 tables all night on my end. It's about 9:30 and the kitchen closes at 10, so things are winding down. I'm in the kitchen talking with the cooks and the assistant manager. I'm standing by the expo table where there's a plastic bin filled with ice and then small buckets for toppings. I've been there since about 3:30 and haven't had anything to eat, so I took a pickles beer from the bucket and bring it to my mouth to eat it. Let me stress at this point that this happened all the time and literally everyone did it, including the assistant manager. But the pickle never reaches my mouth. He slaps my hands and I drop it. I'm kind of confused. The cooks are confused too. I turned to him and asked, "What was that?" He says in a smarmy voice, "Employees can't eat." Rather than remind him that he himself had eaten a few Oreos in just the same manner a few hours before, I stay silent, because I knew revenge is a dish best served cold. Fast forward several weeks, it's a Friday night and the place is very busy. Many of the regulars are at the bar, chatting and having a good time. There's kind of an ante-room where the staff can hang out after work if we don't need the space. I clock out and see that 2 of my coworkers are having a beer there, so I go over to join them. One of the regulars sees us and brings us a bowl of some homemade trail mix he made. It was a nice time, sitting with some friends after work, drinking beer and eating some trail mix. Enter the manager, the assistant manager and another waiter. He has to void something on a check and he needs a manager ID to okay it. Normal stuff. They finish, and as they are going for the door, I see the assistant manager side-eye the trail mix. I know what must be done. He stops and walks over to the table and grabs a handful of the trail mix. Immediately I bring my left hand up and forcefully slap his hand into the bowl. Nuts and raisins go flying everywhere. The 2 people I was with stop talking. Everyone looks at me and silence falls. In a clear, angry voice, the assistant manager turns to me and asks, "Why did you do that?" Without hesitation I look him right in the eye and say, "Employees can't eat." After about 5 seconds of silence he turns and walks away and we resume socializing. The guy was hated almost universally at the place. I had a lot of fun retelling the story for the next few weeks. The next story is called Have to Work My Notice Period. Last month my manager dropped a bombshell. The company has decided to scrap the big project that my team has been working on for the past 2 years. We must wrap up everything and, starting from June, we will all be moved to different teams. Now, I'm a data analyst and the company doesn't have any own projects that require a data analyst. So they looked at my profile, saw I had some basic knowledge of programming and decided to move me to the dev team. Both I and the dev team think it's an insane idea, because I will need lots of training before I become useful and I don't even want to be a full-time dev. But upper management hasn't bothered to ask for our opinion before making all the arrangements. I immediately start looking for a new job and as luck would have it, there's an extremely high request for data analysts in my area. Within a few weeks I have an offer in hand and I give my notice. My contract, I'm in the EU, is very strict regarding notice periods. A resigning employee must give 2 months notice. This is entirely for the benefit of the company that will need to find a replacement. The same applies when a company fires an employee, they must give the employee 2 months notice. However, it's possible to shorten the notice period by mutual agreement. So when I sit down with my manager and HR, I tell them I like to give only 2 weeks notice and leave at the end of May. I tell them that I have already started wrapping up my activities before my move to the dev team, and I don't have any ongoing projects that I need to transfer to my colleagues, so 2 weeks would be more than enough to finish documenting everything. They say absolutely not. I have to stay here for the entire 2 months period, which is fine by me. My new job doesn't start until August and I don't mind being paid in the meantime. The only reason I suggested shortening the notice period was that I thought I was doing the company a favor. I thought I would be stealing their paycheck if I stayed for 2 months, even though I don't have anything left to do. But since they pretty much told me I was being unprofessional or that I was trying to cut and run, okay, I'll take their money in exchange for sitting around doing nothing for a few more weeks. You may think, but they are going to find some boring tasks for you. Well, they can certainly try. But the projects they are working on are so different from what I do that I'm pretty much useless to them. For example, someone will ask, can you do XYZ? And I will honestly answer, I have no idea what an XYZ even is, but I will be happy to help if you teach me. At that point they say it would take too long and it's not worth it to train me since I'm leaving soon. So my working days now go like this. I show up at 9 AM sharp and go to my office, where I'm the only person since the others will move to different teams. I have a leisurely second breakfast, check my email, then I send a message to our Teams group letting them know that I'm free and to ask me if they need help with anything. Then I remote into my home PC and play until lunchtime. I have lunch, coffee, I chat with my coworkers. They are quite nice. It's too bad that upper management is crazy. I'm going to miss them. In the afternoon I usually surf the web. I chat with my friends if they are online, play a bit more and I'm out of the door at 5 PM. By the way, they would like for me to vacate the office so they can use it as a meeting room, but they can't until I leave. There are no empty desks anywhere. The dev team already hired someone else and has no space, so tough luck. The third story is called Suddenly an Expert. Growing up was very interesting as my parents were divorced and I had ADHD, or whatever they are calling it this week. Not so much hyper, but definitely the ADD, and that led to a lot of malicious compliance on my part. Here's one. As a teenager, my parents were divorced and money was an issue, so no allowance to do the things teenagers like to do. This also meant no car, no insurance, you get the idea. I watched some friends work minimum wage jobs and hated that idea, so instead I found a lawnmower and started mowing lawns. I lived in a middle class neighborhood, so 5 to 6 lawns, $20 a pop a weekend would give you some nice spending cash in the 90s. One customer a few streets away asked me to trim his hedges for him. I didn't know how or have the tools, but he did. He showed me what he expected and I made it happen. They looked great. He was so happy that he gave me $100. In today's money that would be about $250. When I got home, I excitedly told my mom what happened. My mom, as wonderful as she was, misunderstood life in general. In her mind, if you fixed a car issue, suddenly you were the car expert and knew everything about cars. Same thing with cooking, computers, audio or video, and yard work. She proceeded to tell me to do the same thing for the bushes in front of our house. I tried to tell her I didn't have the tools and was only following his instructions. They weren't hedges, but she was adamant I do it, to the point she started screaming at me. What would any 16-year-old teenager do? Go grab our replica samurai sword, sharp as all, and start to hack away at the bushes in front of our house. Now, my neighbors knew my mom had unrealistic expectations from previous events, but even this was odd. One of our neighbors came over, asking me, "What in the heck are you doing?" Cut someone's hedges, and mom suddenly thinks I know how to trim bushes. Ah, that again. You, want to borrow some powered clippers? Nope. I'm steaming mad at the moment. Mom, hearing the neighbor, comes out and sees the bushes partially mangled. What the heck are you doing? Trimming the bushes, as I proceeded to whack a few more. I meant how you're supposed to. Sure. Whack. With what tools? Whack. I'm a genius, right? Whack. I trim someone's hedges. Whack. So I must be able to magically trim bushes. Whack. Mom looks befuddled as I continue to hack away using a replica samurai sword. The neighbor steps in, patting me on the back, and says, "I think she got the message," as I turn to look at her with a shocked and befuddled look on her face. I took my shirt and cleaned the now dented blade and walked inside to go take a shower. I'd love to say this kind of behavior stopped, but it never did. She also never asked me to trim the bushes again. The last story is called, "Is it okay if I fire you?" This is a story of malicious compliance that our previous boss had done, but involved me directly, as will be explained. The time frame is around the early 2000s for reference. In my late high school and early college years, I had a job doing telemarketing work during winter and summer breaks. While it was boiler room cold calling, we primarily were soliciting donations for agencies that had contracted us to do the work, so it felt less scuzzy. Think police departments, fire departments, things like that. We kept a portion of donations for operating expenses. Everything over a certain threshold went directly to the receiving party. Everybody wins. I enjoyed the job as the scripts were simple. I was allowed to read a book and such between calls, and a number of my friends were also employed there, so we could hang out during lunch breaks. The pay was a decent chunk above minimum wage at the time, so it was a good gig. I also had a knack for it, and at one point was 15 sales across all the sites they had in operation, second in our building. One summer, while driving to work, my car promptly dies with no warning, and I'm left stranded on the road. As you do in this situation, back before cell phones for poor college students were a thing, I walked to the nearest house and asked to use the phone. I call my dad, who starts driving to get me, and then call my work to let them know I'll be late. My boss says fine, and that he will chat with me when I get in. My father shows up with my mother in 2 cars. I take the Expert, and he begins the arduous process of towing my car back to the house. This involved tying a rope to the front of the car and to the back of his vehicle and crawling back home so he could fix it himself. I've been in that back car and did not envy my father being in the back car with only 10 feet of space between him and the car my mother was driving, but I'm off to work. I arrive at work, clock in almost an hour after the start of my shift, and am promptly told by the front receptionist that my boss would like to see me in his office, so I head on back. Beginning details completed, cue the start of the malicious compliance story. My boss and I have always had a good rapport. I'm a good worker, get good reviews, and he and I have some similar interests outside of work we can chat about occasionally. When I arrive in his office, he's shuffling some papers around and has laid out a few documents facing me. As close as I can recall, this is the conversation that followed. Hope everything worked out with the car, glad to have you here. There are a couple of things I need to discuss with you. First of all, as I'm sure you are aware, being more than 30 minutes late to work is considered a Class C violation if insufficient time is given prior to the occurrence. This is your first violation, so I would like to talk to you about what happens next. I'm sweating at this point. I've never even been talked to about being out of order in anything while working there, and getting my first violation scared the heck out of me. So I'm sitting there, white-faced, and he continues. No official write-up or anything occurs for a first violation, or even the first few Class C violations, but it is the manager's discretion on the punishment depending on past behaviors. Now, you are a good employee, and I've put into corporate a few times to give you a raise, but because you only work during your school breaks, it is denied as you aren't considered full-time. So, the papers I have here are your termination papers, and an offer letter I'd like to extend to you to hire you back on again. So, in short, before I file these, I'd like to ask, is it okay if I fire you? So we go through the process of him firing me. This allowed him to extend an offer to me to rehire me at roughly a 25% increase in pay, since he could justify to corporate the bump as he was hiring someone with experience. In talking with him, he let me know it was something he occasionally did to the high school and college workers to get around the corporate's policy of not allowing raises to people that didn't work 1,000+ hours in a year. It was his own way of being malicious compliant with a policy that didn't allow him to reward some people that he thought deserved it. He had been apparently waiting for me to do something that he could technically fire me for. The way their backend system worked, it wouldn't even show up as a break-in service, since the firing and hiring happened on the same day. And since I never worked more than a minimum 1,000 hours each year, I didn't have any tenure or anything to be worried about losing. The love he and the receptionist had when he walked me back to the front to introduce her the new employee was enjoyable. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button. It really helps in the algorithm. Have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.